Hi, everybody. My name is Nicolas Michel. I'm a technical product manager in the networking and security business unit at VMware. I'm in charge of the layer 3 features and of the Edge platform, right, for NSX. And I am thrilled to present this VMware Code session today for this 2021 edition. This year is still virtual, but I really hope that next year will be all in person and we can interact and discuss all together, exchange ideas, and then you expose your problems from an infrastructure standpoint. I will be very glad to help you. I am very thrilled again to present this session because I'm a network engineer. So I'm a double CCIE. I've been writing some books for CCIEs as well, and being there at VMworld as of today to present you what can you do from an infrastructure as code with NSX is just a blessing. So I'm really happy that we have such a large audience. As of today, you will see that infrastructure as code and automation is really, really important. More important when we talk about networking construct within NSX. What can we do? What tools do we want to leverage in your infrastructure, etc.? What are the possibilities that we can achieve with NSX and automation? So let me share my screen so that I can start the session. All right. So I'm gonna talk to you about this wonderful topic of NSXT and infrastructure as code and how to automate your NSXT infrastructure. Again, you have the hashtag here, code 2741. Do not hesitate to send me a message on Twitter using that hashtag, and I will make sure that I will answer your questions. And I will also drop my email in the chat window so that after the session, if you want to interact with me, there is a possibility. All the slides that you will see here will be available to you guys, and the code as well. So I will be, you will have the link in the session, but I will upload everything on Git in the very, very near future, maybe tonight. Quick disclaimer, the usual disclaimer in the VMworld 2021 presentation that everything that may be discussed here may be still under development. So yeah, but you're used to that, right? So infrastructure as code, that's something that it's been around for quite a while. So I'm not going very deep on that particular topic. I'm not going to explain all the advantages because you already know that, right? I'm just going to explain to you how can we leverage infrastructure as code within NSX, and we only have 30 minutes. So, and we have 4 demos within these 30 minutes. So I'm going to do that as quick as possible with the best interaction with you guys. If you have any question, please use the Q&A box, and at the end we'll have a live Q&A session. So when you want to use infrastructure as code within NSX, so you need to come with a plan, right? You need to make sure that from end to end, what do you need in order to leverage infrastructure as code within NSXT, right? So you need to think about, first you will need to deploy your OVA file into your vCenter environment, right? So that's the first step, basically. That's the first step. After you take care of the design, obviously, first you want to make sure that you have all your design lined up, your uplink profile, etc., and then you want to translate everything into infrastructure as code. So, but when you will launch your script, the first thing that you are going to do in your NSXT infrastructure is that you will upload your OVA file into your vCenter, and then the NSXT manager will install itself, etc. Once you have your NSXT manager, what do you have to do? You have to do all your basic configuration. You have to apply a license. You have to register your vCenter. You have to create your profiles. You will have to enable IPv6, set up your MTUs, create your IP pools for the taps, create your uplink profile for your compute cluster and uplink profile for your edge cluster, create your name teaming policy so that your BGP traffic is very deterministic. That's key. That's key, right? Because what you are going to do with infrastructure as code in your NSXT environment, you want to replicate that. You want to reuse that. You don't want to just test something and then get and be done with it. You want to reuse all your code for your dev environment, for your staging environment, and for your production environment, so that you have no surprises, and then you can reuse and make the best use of your time. That's something that you can really struggle with, is that sometimes you will say, hey, Nicholas, it will be complicated for me to to code everything, because it will take me some time. And we have a slide on that I will show you a little bit later. So once you have your NSXT manager basic configuration, then you want to have all your networking construct. And when I'm talking about networking construct, I'm talking about tier 0, tier 1 segments, overlay segments, VLAN backed segments, BFD timers, BGP configuration, BGP neighbors, autonomous system, IPv6. You want to create your uplink interfaces, etc., etc. So really, the topology that you are going to implement within NSX, you gotta think about that, and we'll see how can we translate that into infrastructure as code. Why do we want to do that? Because nowadays you can see that it's really easy to do a mistake, and it's really time consuming to do everything manually, and it will cost you a lot of money if you have an error. So infrastructure as code will definitely help you to scale, to test, and to, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, but that's something that is really important to understand, is that you will be able to reuse something and to replicate either an issue or replicate an infrastructure, a topology. So I mentioned earlier, at the beginning, you will struggle a little bit by saying, okay, this is faster if I do it manually. The first time, yes, probably it will be faster. But in my particular case, I work within the networking and security as a business unit, and I need to deploy all version of NSX, right? Someday, for example, I have a developer that told me, hey, Nicholas, I want you to test this particular feature, this particular OSPF feature. So I had to rip my lab, I have to delete everything, and I had to reinstall NSXT from scratch. And how did I do that? At first, I did everything manually, but then I was able to leverage infrastructure as code, right? And at the end, right now, I can deploy any version of NSXT with the same configuration every time. I can deploy an EVPN topology, I can deploy a BGP topology, VRF Lite, OSPF, I can deploy it all without even touching my mouse. So that's very, very useful, especially if when you want to replicate something, but also if you're working in professional services, when you want to replicate designs from project to project. So infrastructure as code, quick generalities here. There are plenty of tools on the market in the industry, I would say. We have Ansible, Terraform. What are the difference? One of them is independent, declarative, imperative. And the reason we have that is that there is not a single tool that will allow you to do everything perfectly. That tool doesn't exist yet. So that's why I will show you what I'm doing on a daily basis with my tools. How can I leverage all these tools within my code, within my infrastructure? Because maybe Ansible is better for something, and the Terraform is better for some of the tasks. And sometimes I'm even using a native REST API, because neither Ansible or the Terraform are supporting that particular feature. So yeah, you'll see. So you will see in the demos that I'm using Ansible to provision my NSXT infrastructure. In my opinion, that's the best tool to deploy my OVA, to apply my license, etc. You will see that a little bit later. When I have that NSXT infrastructure up and running, I'm leveraging native REST API and Terraform in order to create my topologies. For example, when we released EVPN at the beginning, the Terraform was still in development for the NSXT provider from an EVPN standpoint. So I was using REST API to configure my EVPN configuration. But Terraform will be the main central point of configuration of orchestration, if I can say, when you want to leverage all your networking construct and deploy them very fast within your NSX infrastructure. Sorry. Then at the end, because we are network people, we want to test the connectivity, right? It is great to install NSX. It is great to create your tier 0, your BGP configuration, but at the end you want to test the connectivity and do some packet capture maybe. So what you want is to create a template, and for that I will be using the Packer from HashiCorp, and I will be leveraging that template and create my virtual machine, my app, my DB, and my web server using Terraform based on that Packer template. And all these tools are leveraging the NSX REST API. You will see that a little bit in the next slide. So yes, when we build NSX, I'm working with the devs daily. So when we build NSX, when we implement a feature within NSX, we first we think about API first. That's the first thing that comes to our mind. We say, okay, how are we going to consume that particular feature? What are the parameters that are needed? And we document that in our API guides. And then comes the UI, right? So it's not the other way around. The UI in NSX is just an API consuming. It's just consume our APIs. The API is built from day one. And with Policy API, you are able, with a single API call, you are able to create multiple objects, multiple configurations. So that's the beauty of the Policy API. So that's an example here. I want to create a segment within NSX. So you can see I have segment application 1. It's not connected to any gateway. It's on the overlay transport zone, and I specify a subnet. I'm doing that with the UI, but with your favorite browser, you are able to inspect the API code that is being made in the background. So you can see that, and you can either check on the developer.vmware.com to have all the parameters. That's our official documentation for our API, or you can simply launch your favorite browser and inspect the API code. That's very, very handy, so that you can really reuse that particular API code, transform it into like a Python, the request, and just use it in your infrastructure as code, the programs. So we've talked about multiple tools. I've been talking about Ansible, Terraform, etc. But you have multiple options. You can either install them in a virtual machine. You can either install these tools on your laptop. But the way I do it is that I create a container. I have my own container. So I also leverage infrastructure as code myself for my own tools. So that I'm creating my container that has all these tools. So my baseline is Ubuntu 18.04. And within that Docker file, I install the Terraform, Ansible, the Python 3, Vault, all my tools that I needed, all the Python libraries as well, so that I don't have to create a virtual environment. That's just a preference, right? You are free to create a virtual environment with the Python, for example, or create a virtual machine that is dedicated to your infrastructure as code. But the way I like to do it is that I like to do it with a container, because if I want to upgrade one of the tools, I can just delete that container, change a variable in my Docker file, rebuild the container, and have an updated the tool in my container. So I've been doing that for approximately 5 years now, and it's been working great. So I really encourage you to have a look at that. And I put my my repos for this particular Docker container. And all the code that you will see here today would be uploaded today on this particular GitHub repo. So let's start with deploying NSXT infrastructure, right? So quick slide here. Most of you know Ansible, and you will be able to recognize that particular playbook. So you can see here we're going to install and deploy an NSXT manager. So we are using the NSXT deploy OVA module, right? And within a task, we are putting all the variables in a variable, and this variable refers to variable into the deploy NSX cluster variables.yaml file, as you can see here. But that's just here for reference, right? You're pretty aware of what's going on in this particular task. So that's again a slide for reference. I will talk about all the steps that I will do in my playbooks with Ansible. So that this slide is just here for reference. Same thing here. We'll enable MTUs of 9,000 IPv6, and we'll deploy 6 NSXT edges. So let's get going. So I'm creating a bash script. That bash script will call Ansible and REST API call pretty natively. So as you can see here, the first step would be to really upload my OVF, my OVA template to the vSphere environment. Once it's installed, it will register vCenter. So in this particular case, I'm using native REST API. I could use Ansible as well, but I just wanted to show you the different options. So I'm registering the vCenter to NSX. Then I'm applying the license, because you need to apply your license to your NSXT manager. And then I'm creating all my profiles. So here I'm creating an uplink profile for my compute clusters with a multi-tap environment. So, and same thing here, I'm creating another uplink profile with multi-tap and name teaming policy so that my BGP traffic is deterministic, right? I'm creating also IP pools for NSX so that I can have IPs for my taps, and then my transport zone overlays and VLANs. I'm not reusing the default one that are installed by default, but I'm creating ones for myself. So once the transport zone are installed, I'm going to, with a single playbook here, as you can see, as a single playbook, I will tell my NSXT manager to install NSXT to all the ESXi hosts on the compute cluster. So with one playbook, I can install NSXT on hundreds ESXi servers. Then I'm enabling IPv6 and an MTU of 9,000. Then I'm creating my 2 edge cluster profile so that I can leverage fast convergence from a BFD standpoint between my edges. Right, so that's for the edge VM and the edge BM, the bare metal and the virtual machine. And then I'm going to deploy my my edge nodes. So I'm going to install 6 edge nodes, as you can see here. And at the end, I will put these 6 edge nodes into edge clusters. And I haven't done a single click here. Obviously, that's a pre-recorded video, because otherwise it would take a little bit longer than that. So here I'm creating the edge clusters. And yes, when I log in to my NSXT environment, you can see that NSXT is installed, my license is installed. I don't have any networking construct, but I have my IP pools for my taps. I have my MTU that is enabled for 9,000 for jumbo frames. IPv4 and IPv6 is enabled. And I don't have any networking construct, right? Because Ansible was just there to deploy my NSXT infrastructure. You can see here, I have 1 compute cluster, but it was exactly the same code. It was exactly the same playbook if it was 100 or 200 servers in my particular case. Yes, and then I'm creating my edge cluster profile and my transport node profile. So you can see everything has been Ansible provision, as I put it here in the descriptions. And I haven't done a single click. I was able to do something else in the meantime. And yeah. And my, yes, obviously my vCenter is registered and up and running there. All right, then the next step would be to create my topology, my networking topology, my tier 0, my tier 1s, my overlay segments, the way to interconnect my tier 1 to my tier 0, create my external uplink interfaces. So this is the topology that we are going to work on. I'm going to create 2 tier 0, right? Tier 0, the first tier 0 will be running in active standby mode on edge node 1 and edge node 2. The second tier 0 will be running in active high availability mode on edge node 3 and 4. I'm able to leverage /31 uplinks here between my top of racks and my tier 0. And you can see I have my BGP autonomous system. I have my loopback interfaces, my VLANs. I will deploy tier 1s, and I will deploy also this virtual machine. On the top, as you can see here, we have a Ubuntu virtual machine. This virtual machine is outside of the NSX fabric. And in the demos, we will be using that virtual machine in order to test the north-south traffic so that you can see that BGP is established, exchanging routes, etc., etc. So same thing as with Ansible. You can see here the concept for Terraform. We get a provider. So the provider is developed by us, and we put a documentation on the HashiCorp website. And that's so you have the data source, and most important, you have the resource. What's your intent in your resource? Well, you got to specify what's your intent from a Terraform standpoint, what you want to deploy, and all the variables that belong to that particular resources. So here I already talked to you. So again, you will have to plan everything. You have to plan about your VLAN segment. You will have to plan about redistributions within BGP or from the tier 1 to the tier 0, for example. You got to think everything that you do manually, you got to think about it, make a plan, and transform that plan into infrastructure as code with the Terraform. So here you can see an example of creating VLAN segments or tier 0, right? The code will be available, so I'll go a little bit faster here. You will have the slide for reference. I have my tier 0 interfaces, and something that is really important is my BGP configuration with my neighbors, my address family that I want to enable. For example, I want to use EVPN in my infrastructure. Well, you got to specify in your address family that you want to use L2 VPN, EVPN. Here, the tier 1, the overlays, and you can see here I have both IPv4 and IPv6. So I'm deploying this overlay segment with dual stack in mind. Let's get going. So I'm deploying my topology. I'll just do a Terraform plan at the beginning so that Terraform will make an assessment. It will check my intent, right, in my configuration, in my infrastructure as code, and it will check that my intent versus what's actually configured. Right. So you can see here we are planning to add 55 objects into the NSXT manager and destroy nothing, change nothing, because there is absolutely nothing configured from a networking construct standpoint within NSXT manager up to this point. So then I do a Terraform apply. I confirm that I want to create all these objects, and then Terraform is creating all these objects. And as you can see, it's pretty fast. It's pretty fast. After a few seconds in my lab, it was pretty fast. So it's fast to create these objects. Now you gotta let NSX the time to process and to make sure that it realizes the states of your configuration. So for example, I was able to create my 21 segments. We can see some are failing, but it's just the time for the segment to be processed by NSXT. If you do a refresh, it would be green again. So here, so I have my tier 0, my tier 1s. I have my uplink interfaces. If I go to my tier 0, I have both my active standby and active. I have my BGP configuration. I have my BGP neighbor, and you can see I have my IPv4 BGP neighbor, but I also have my IPv6 BGP neighbor. So I'm able to provision an IPv4 and an IPv6 stack here. If I do a get logical router into my edge, again, if I go to my VRF15 for my SR tier 0. I'm able to check my BGP neighbors, etc., etc. Yes, I can see my BGP neighbors from an IPv4 standpoint, also from an IPv6 standpoint. I can see that I'm sending prefixes like between 20 and 36 prefixes, and then I can check my BGP table, right? So that's my BGP table that is being exchanged, that is being updated with the top of racks, and then I'm gonna check into the routing table if these prefixes are installed into the routing table. And yes, now I can verify that I have connectivity to my to the internet from a tier 0 standpoint. So everything is good. All right. Now that I have my NSXT infrastructure deployed, I have my networking construct deployed, I need to deploy some virtual machine to test, right? So I will be using the packer that will build an image. It will build a template on vSphere. So it is not fully related to NSX. It is more related to vSphere in this particular case. I have to specify all the host name, IPv4, subnet mask, DNS, etc. in a variable file. Same thing as if you were doing that with NSXT to create, for example, a tier 0. So I'm launching my Packer template. Well, I'm creating my Packer template. It will download the ISO from the internet, and then it will re-upload the ISO to your vCenter environment. And then you can see it's creating a virtual machine, right? And it will launch that virtual machine, and it will install everything for you. All the parameters that you have decided in your the Packer file, that will be automatically done for you. And you will need to have DHCP, right, on this virtual machine, because Packer requests that. You will have the DHCP, and then when the virtual machine has connectivity, it will install all the updates, etc., related to the operating system, and then it will shut down the virtual machine, and it will transform that virtual machine into a template, and that template will be reused to be consumed. Well, it will be ready to be consumed by the Terraform. You've been familiar with that in the previous slides. Here I'm deploying well, a 3-tier app using the Terraform. So a web server, an application server, and a database. Pretty standard. And I'm doing that. I do a Terraform plan. Again, it's making an assessment on what I want to deploy, right? And what's already deployed in my infrastructure. So here I'm leveraging vSphere. I'm deploying everything on vSphere, but I also need to attach this virtual machine onto an overlay segment.
What do you need help with?
I'm going to set up a ping from my Ubuntu VM that is outside of NSX in the meantime. And you can see that when I come back, when the VM are installed and up and running, I can see that I have connectivity between my VM that is outside of NSX towards my my web server. But I have also connectivity from an IPv4 and from an IPv6 standpoint. And the beauty with infrastructure as code is that you can destroy pretty much everything instantly as well. So just before we do that, you can see that I'm able to see all my virtual machines that I just been deployed within NSX. I'm able to check the IPs, on which logical segment or on which port it is installed within NSX, and then I'm able to destroy all these resources yeah, I can delete everything within my NSXT infrastructure and try another topology, for example, or replicate that particular topology into another environment. All right, that will leave us to do we have some questions? So I think I already answered that particular question. Jake has been wondering what tools to invest in most heavily. Is VMware planning to add full support for NSX in a single tool in the future? Will Ansible, Terraform, something else be better supported in the future? So at the moment, we do support Ansible, we do support the Terraform. We are both heavily invested into these tools. Obviously, you are aware of the acquisitions of SourceStack. You will learn about that a little bit later. Which percentage of NSX API is available in PowerCLI? That's a good question. I would have to check that. I can't tell you the exact percentage right now. Yeah. Does anybody have a live question that they want to ask, or either in the Q&A box or? All right. So thank you, everybody. It was really a pleasure to present that infrastructure as code session at the VMworld 2021 for VMware Code. Honestly, yes, it's been a pleasure. Me being a network engineer that with a CCIE that didn't know how to code, and invested a lot of time into infrastructure as code. I'm really glad I'm in front of you guys as of today, and I'm ready to answer all your questions that you may have through me. So that's my email. Let me put my email. Let me put my emails to everybody. Right. If you want
I
to.
see a question in the chat actually, Nicholas. Would you use manager or policy REST API calls?
Definitely policy API. So manager API was the first API that was used within NSX. So we are transitioning everything to policy API. Policy API is much more convenient. Yeah, definitely do policy API. 100%, 1000% even.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Nicholas, and everyone on the session.
My pleasure. Yeah, can you paste the GitHub repo in the chat? It will be in the slide. I don't have it from top of my head. It will be in the slides. Definitely be available to you ASAP.